Hello and welcome to this episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV, in which we are going to look at the huge strides that the Indian Navy has taken, much to its own initiative, by being the leading service in India in indigenization. And our two experts will educate us further on that. We have Commodore Anil J. Singh, who is of the Indian Maritime Foundation and a naval officer with a wide amount of experience in how the Navy should project itself. And we have the recently retired Vice Admiral A.K. Chawla, who was C&C of the Naval Southern Command. I'll start with you, Admiral. In our earlier show, in which we were also privileged to have you, you also explained some of the strengths of the Indian Navy. And what particularly strikes me is the ability of the Navy to keep ahead of the pack with its design initiatives. It has apparently more than 80 ships to its credit since the Navy took up the designing and building programs in the 70s, and 48 state-of-the-art ships and submarines are currently under construction. So, how is it that the Navy has been able to achieve it and the other two services are still dependent largely on buying things from abroad?
What you say is very true. I think the secret lay in the vision and foresight of our forefathers in the Indian Navy. Interestingly, many viewers may not be aware that we had set up the DRDO labs, that is the Naval Physical and Oceanographic Lab, in 1952, before the DRDO was even formed. And today there are 3 dedicated naval labs, the Naval Physical and Oceanographic Lab, which looks after sonars and underwater sensors, the Naval Materials and Research Laboratory, which looks after advanced materials, and of course the Naval Science and Technological Laboratory, which looks after underwater weapons, largely underwater weapons and related equipment. So at the beginning itself, and this NPOL was within the naval campus. It was within the campus of the Southern Naval Command for many years. Now it shifted to its independent premises in the late 1990s. So that was one step that we took, and since then we've had a very close collaboration with the DRDO, and that's one of the reasons why we have been ahead of the technology curve as compared to the others. The second was, as you rightly brought out, ship design. Now, it was in the early 1960s that the Navy set up its own design department. And that has grown to an extent today where we have designed our own aircraft carrier, which has had a very successful maiden sailing. And I was, in fact, on board the ship when it sailed. Okay. We are having the capability to design all kinds of vessels and submarines too in the coming years. And that's a capability that I think we can be justifiably proud of. Thirdly, of course, into shipbuilding, we commissioned the first ship in Garden Reach and Shipbuilders Engineers in the early 1960s. So it was that early, and that's the reason why the Navy has been ahead of the technology curve. A couple of other things that we have done is that in the recent past, in 2005-06, we were the first to publish the Science and Technology Roadmap for the Indian Navy.
Okay.
Identifying the cutting-edge technologies that the Navy will require in the years ahead. That then evolved to a technology perspective and capability roadmap, which included equipment to be inducted and the technology, which was principally to get the private sector on board in inducting new technologies and in research and development. That has now, of course, graduated to a defense technology perspective and capabilities roadmap, which is published on the website. Okay. So that was another way in which we have been ahead.
So you've actually led the discussion forward with so many points that you've raised about the Navy's achievements. And Commodore Jai Singh, I want you to take up further where the Admiral has left. 2 things that strike me in the little homework I've been able to do. One is, of course, the compliments that recently the President of India has paid to the Navy as quite clearly being an impressive contribution for the making of Atmanirbhar Bharat with its projects and with his inspection of the Vikrant. And Admiral mentioned about that. And with it comes another point that I have picked up, that the Navy has targeted to become a 170-ship Navy by 2027, when it will hopefully try and get to the deadlines where Right now, I believe it has 130 ships. So if it misses the deadline, what's the timeline we are looking at? The other is that, the whole arrangements that Vishakhapatnam, the Kaveri class destroyer, and the Kaveri class submarine, Velai, are being inducted into the Navy soon. Now, all these projects are clearly landmark projects in terms of the Navy delivering on the country's expectations with the massive funding that is coming the Navy's way, and rightly so. Where does it leave the Navy vis-a-vis the Americans in particular and some others trying to push their platforms into the Navy, because the interest of America or France or even Russia has always been in selling weapons to us and not always allowing us to develop. If you compare it with the AUKUS program that the Americans and the Brits and the Australians have gone ahead and done and left us out of the loop despite all the chest thumping about Quad. So your views, I mean, there are a number of things I've raised, but you can elaborate on it.
Firstly, I think, thank you firstly for having me on the show. I think as Admiral Chawla said, it was the foresight of our pioneers soon after independence that really laid the foundation for the Navy of today. And I think we owe them a great debt of gratitude for that. The Navy very early on realized that if we have to be a meaningful Navy of a nation that has to count on the global scale, on the global platforms, then we have to be a builder Navy. We can't be a buyer Navy. And I think events over the last 50 years have borne that out. Our import dependence, even today, is a strategic vulnerability that India suffers from, as we are seeing with events unfolding in Russia and Ukraine, which may be 5,000 miles away, but the impact will be felt eventually even by us in certain areas. Our shipyards have done a great job. I mean, as Admiral Chawla said, we are building an indigenous aircraft carrier. Not many navies have done that. We've built an indigenous nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Only 5 other navies have done that. So that is a great testament to our shipbuilding skills, our technological base, industrial technological base, and our scientific community. The point now is, I think if we can put all this together and get the desired synergy and the efficiency of all the stakeholders in the game, that's the MOD, the service, the shipyards, private industry, the MSME ecosystem, then I think we can really project ourselves into the next league. Unfortunately, the implementation of all our very, very sort of ambitious plans has been found wanting for various reasons. I mean, no one can be blamed for it. There's been a financial crunch at times. There's been a capacity crunch at times. We've had to rely even now on a lot of foreign equipment. We may be building the platforms, but we have had to rely on foreign...
Some engines, I'm told.
Engines, certain weapons, certain sensors, etc. But we are addressing them, I think, one by one. The Navy has a very sort of yardstick for measuring indigenization. We call it the float, move and fight trilogy. So float is putting a ship in the water and it floats. Right. Well, we've achieved more than 90% indigenization. All our ships are now being built with Indian steel. And our future submarines are going to be built with Indian steel, including the nuclear ballistic missile submarines. So that's a great achievement for our industrial capability. In the move element, which is propelling a submarine or a ship, propulsion, systems, pipes, etc., etc., the machinery element, we are more than, I think we're almost 70%. Perhaps Admiral Chawla will be able to give a more accurate figure on that. Yes, engines is a vulnerability. We don't have our own engines, but that is not so much because we can't do it, because naval shipbuilding inherently cannot offer the kind of scales to industry for it to be for them to get a viable return on the investment. That has been, I think, the primary reason. But I think we'll address that now with this imbroglio that's happening in the Russia-Ukraine thing, and we were dependent on them for a lot of engines. We are going to address this, I think, on a war footing now. And the third element is the fight element, which is basically the weapons, the sensors, which really, with the warship fights. In that, I think we've achieved about 60%. If you realize now, every Indian naval warship has indigenous sonars, which is a very important capability, and indigenous communication and data link suite, which is again a very important capability in a networked environment, which are going to be fighting wars in the future. Weapons, we are making progress. I mean, the BrahMos missile, of course, is a great success story. We've started exporting it also. But there are certain areas where we still need foreign support. We are getting it. But I think we are getting to where we would like to be perhaps in a few years from now. And let's face it, I think indigenization as a term does not mean that every nut and bolt has to be made in India.
Right.
You've got to be able to put the system together in India and be self-reliant in being able to support and operate that system thereafter. That the vulnerability is not in getting the system. The vulnerability
It's
is
very
in
important you've
subsequent
given
looking
that
after it.
definition more clarity. You know, it doesn't mean exactly that from scratch to finish, everything has to, because some of the biggest military and weapons platforms in the world are manufactured by a collection of 2 or 3 countries. It's not always that everything is made from beginning to end in the US or in Russia. Russia used to make a lot of stuff in collaboration with Ukraine. And the US makes a lot of stuff in collaboration with Britain. And we are seeing, as I mentioned about the AUKUS submarine program, very clearly it's going to be 3 countries that will come in. But Admiral, explain to us the autonomous underwater vehicle being developed by the DRDO's NSTL at Visakhapatnam. Because as the Commodore brought out, the AUV will have the ability to sense, to track, to identify, target and destroy enemy vessels, and this is to me a major force multiplier. And this apparently is largely our own product, and that's a great achievement. And also it could be looking at also deep submergence rescue vehicle capabilities. So there's a lot packed in this, and particularly the underwater capability of the Navy. I was reading something recently and which said that, you know, when you talk of Indo-Pacific and the role of the Navy in Quad, we often miss out what is below the surface. And that is a great advantage you can have vis-a-vis your adversaries. Your view, sir?
You know, the navies today have to, and as far as the Indian Navy is concerned, we have categorized our necessity to fight in 7 dimensions.
Okay.
Now, these dimensions of warfare that we need to have the capability of include the surface warfare, which includes all the warships and associated equipment, weapons and sensors. The underwater warfare, which includes the submarines and other autonomous and smaller manned and unmanned underwater vessels. It includes aircraft, which fly from ships or from carriers, fixed-wing aircraft, or from ashore for maritime reconnaissance. It includes the element of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is very important in maritime warfare. It includes the element of electronic warfare, which is another very critical component of modern warfare. It includes the information of cyber warfare, which is today absolutely essential to the interlinking of ships and things that go on at sea. And finally, of course, there's the dimension of space. Now, in these 7 dimensions require a range of technologies, and as you are aware, technologies are changing and developing at a quantum pace, and the navies or indeed the armed forces that don't keep pace will be left behind and will become dinosaurs in effect. So with all these dimensions of warfare, the Navy has identified many areas of advanced cutting-edge technologies, and what you brought out in terms of the UUV that is being developed by the NSTL is just one of them. In fact, I would like to mention the range of technologies, some of them which, you know, you can't mention everything comprehensively. Unmanned systems in general. These include not only the unmanned underwater vessels that you're talking about, but also the unmanned surface vessels. It also includes remotely piloted aircraft, which today are capable of huge ranges and massive endurance, you know, without the crew. So all these technologies are being looked at and being developed in collaboration with various Indian agencies, including the DRDO. And as far as the unmanned platforms are concerned, another thing that comes which is endemic to them would be advanced computing systems, artificial intelligence, big data analysis, because in order to make them work effectively, they have to have their own intelligence, which is gleaned after collation of big data, which is then incorporated into the systems. And the underwater, the vessel that you're talking about being developed by the NSTL will be one such vessel.
Okay. So, I mean, it's mind-boggling, the level of information that these platforms can gather and the level of information that is available to you as commanders to take decisions. I learned long ago that naval officers are very good at mapping the sea. And for many people, you know, it's just lots of water there. but the currents, the temperatures at which things happen, and what is below the surface is of enormous importance to plan operations. And Commodore Jai Singh, I want to understand, I'm talking of the sea and underwater, and I picked up the last few words of the Admiral. Submarine capabilities. Now, I believe that there is a project which has been approved by the Defense Ministry, whether it was approved last year or this debate's been going on for more than a decade, is about the submarine project, for which they have approved 50,000 crores or so for the P-75I project. And under these, various submarines at various levels have been manufactured and are being manufactured. I understand that, there is INS Karanj, INS Kalavari, INS Khanderi. These are all INS Wagir. These are all important platforms. But what to me is very interesting is many of these submarines are considered superior to even the collaborative partners' productions elsewhere from where we exchange technology, because the several aspects of naval combat performing by these submarines, like anti-ship activity, intelligence gathering, mine laying or countering that, and surveillance operations, and also the fact that India has built or is building 2 SSBNs, which is very important for our second strike capability. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, thank you for that question. As a submariner, I'd love to answer it.
Yeah, I knew. I kept it for you.
Right.
I saved it for you.
So we have basically, there are 3 kinds of submarines that operate. Blue Water Navy would operate 3 kinds of submarines. Of course, there's the ballistic missile submarine, which is not a war-fighting platform, essentially. It's a strategic platform. That's the SSBN, where we've shown remarkable progress. We've got, the Arihant is already commissioned. The second one is very close to commissioning from what I understand. The third one has been launched. The fourth one is at an advanced stage of construction. And I don't know if there's a fifth following on or not. But for an effective SSBN capability, an SSBN is required for a credible second strike. We have a no first use policy. So the second strike becomes very important. Our retaliatory capacity and capability is very important. And to have a 24-hour, 24/7, 365 capability at sea, you need 4 SSBNs. If you see, the French program is 4, the British program is 4. Of course, the Russians, Chinese, and Americans have many more. So we've successfully carried out a deterrent patrol. That means we have the complete robust communication and command and communication ecosystem in place. After all, don't forget, a commanding officer at sea, thousands of miles away, many hundreds of meters below the surface, has to be given an order to launch a missile at a specific time, a nuclear missile, a ballistic missile, from a command authority which is ashore, on the Prime Minister's or whosoever is heading that order. That command authority itself may be under attack. So that sort of robustness in the ecosystem has to be brought in, and that the deterrent patrol proved. Now it's a question of getting the capacity, the platforms. So in another 5 or 7 years, I think we should be able to have what we call a continuous at sea deterrence capability. That's as far as the SSBN program goes. It's completely indigenous because this is not the kind of technology anybody shares with anybody else. We had to go about it on our own. What the submarines you refer to are the conventional submarine program, the Project 75. This is part of a 30-year plan that we had approved in 1999 with the aim of having a steady stream of submarines being built indigenously so that we'd never be short of submarines, or we would have the requisite number of conventional, modern, capable submarines with us at all times. So this envisaged that we would have 2 production lines of 6 submarines each with a foreign collaborator so that we get the latest in design and stealth technologies and weapons. And based on the knowledge and technology we get from these 2 programs, we will then have the capability to design our own submarines for the future. So Project 75 is the first of those programs. It's a program for 6 boats, 4 of which have already been commissioned. That's Kalvari, Karanj, Khanderi and Vela, which you referred to. The 5th is undergoing sea trials. And the 6th is at a very advanced stage of fitting out and probably get commissioned next year. That will be the end of Project 75 as a program. Project 75I is also a program which should have been actually running concurrently with the 75, but because of financial constraints, it has sort of slipped. That is now coming under the new strategic partnership model. That's now being progressed under the strategic partnership model. How that pans out, the next couple of years will sort of tell us more about that. Thereafter, it is intended to have our own submarine design and building capability with no assistance from any foreign collaborator. So that is, I think, a very positive step that's been taken. The more important thing, I think, which we are looking at now is a nuclear attack submarine program, our SSN program.
Yes.
For that, if you recollect, about, I think in 2015, a CCS clearance was given for a preliminary design sort of capability, which successfully was completed in 2020 or 21. And now it is about the CCS approving the actual indigenous construction of these 6 SSNs that India is looking at. That I think is still awaiting CCS approval. And I don't see it not happening. It's probably a question of the money being available, the timelines, etc. Because for a blue water navy like the Indian Navy, which is going to have to look after the entire Indian Ocean, the Indo-Pacific, India is going to look after the Indo. Everybody else is Pacific.
Yes.
We might get some support from the Americans, we may get some support from the French, but Indian Ocean is largely Indo. And with the Chinese sort of footprint that we expect in the Indian Ocean by 2030, where the Western Indian Ocean could be, so far we have never been challenged in the Western Indian Ocean. There's no other navy which has the capacity to challenge us there. But if tomorrow China were to position a formidable capability of Djibouti or with Gwadar being under their control, etc., in the Western Indian Ocean, it could seriously undermine our own sort of sea lines of communication, our tanker traffic, our energy security coming out of the Gulf, etc. So we need that SSN capability to hold them at bay, basically.
Well, there's another element to it. I mean, you very comprehensive answer indeed, and this was really up your street. But the fact that Russia and China are getting closer, in the geostrategic space, it is being seen as a possibility of Russia-China greater engagement post-Ukraine might cause a certain discomfort to us in the western parts of the Straits of Malacca, and which was earlier taken for granted as an area where we could really alter the course of the engagement. But Admiral, this is perhaps the last question because we are running out of time. There is a classified project, INS Dhruv, and I know you're not going to tell us the classified stuff. I don't expect you to in the interest of national security. But a couple of things that are in the public domain, that it's a 10,000-ton ship and it is a futuristic anti-ballistic missile capability that it provides, is going to act both as an early warning system as well and help us identify enemy's missile capabilities in the high seas. It is also equipped with a DRDO developed state-of-the-art scanned array of radars, and radars are very important, as you have yourself brought out, AESA being one of them. And this will obviously make all the difference for the Indian Navy, particularly between our western coastline and the Gulf of Aden. Your views?
Without getting into specifics, Maroof, every advanced navy, in order to test out new technology, which I mentioned before that we are in very close collaboration with the DRDO, requires a platform at sea to check them out. So hitherto, we have been using existing naval platforms by retrofitting them, by installing this new equipment, and then using them dually for their normal role as well as for the trial purposes. This is not a very cost-effective way of doing it because then you don't have the original platform available to you at all times. The retrofitment causes certain loss of capability. It has to continuously undergo trials at sea and come back in harbor for changes. So I think ships like the Dhruv will change this, and that was the aim, that you have a dedicated platform for trials of various sorts of equipment, whatever we might choose to develop, and thereafter test them out at sea and then install them on naval platforms. So I think ships like this are very important, and they will serve a major role in various avenues in order to test out our capabilities, in order to also act as a defensive mechanism when required.
Well, thanks. Enough said, and I think that those who know and understand will draw their message from it. Commodore, last question, short answer preferably. 30 ships or so of the Indian Navy use gas turbines from Ukraine's dockyards, which are made as a primary source of propulsion. Where do you see that option now getting stymied or continuing?
Yeah, that is something I think that is of concern to the Indian Navy perhaps, because, and we've also heard that that particular factory has been damaged. Now how damaged, how much is what is the extent of damage, whether it's going to affect production, I don't know, but it is definitely going to have a trickle-down effect. But the Indian Navy over the years has sort of diversified again its dependence on gas turbines. I think the newer ships have all got the American LM2500 gas turbine. It's the older ships which had the Ukrainian built gas turbines, and perhaps the new 1135.6 ships which are going to be built, or 2 are being built in Russia and 2 are going to be built at the Goa shipyard. I'm not sure whether they're they're going to be affected by this, or have those engines already been ordered and delivered? I'm not very sure on that. But yes, I do expect that it would cause us a little concern. Now, to what extent, I really can't say. How much is what kind of spares do we already have? There was a CCS meeting the other day where the service chiefs were assured the Prime Minister that 6 months of spares, 6 months capability will not be affected. So let's see.
Okay, so on that note, I think we've learned a lot about the Navy's capabilities, and I think the message that comes out is that the Indian Navy has considerable inner strengths of its own, its design capability and the programs that are going full speed ahead. Some of them need to speed up a bit more to achieve the Navy's own targets, and setting of targets is something which concerns me because you tie yourself up in knots. But that apart, I think there's a lot of room for optimism, regardless of what Ukraine and the conflict there will eventually throw up as challenges for us. But thanks very much for joining us, and thanks for watching. Until the next episode, goodbye.